This story begins with a story about one of the 3 best hunter training schools in the world called Valhalla. Every year countless applicants apply to be honored to bear the name of this institution and defend its values. This institution had a very tough selection process with 500 people competing for one place each time. There are a lot of applicants, but no more than 150 students will be able to graduate from this institute. Everyone was dressed in a prestigious business suit because it was a very strict educational institution and their rules must be respected and followed by every student. The students were divided into pairs and each pair had a separate place to fight. Feature or selection supervisor had to watch this performance. This time it was a Valhalla instructor of the highest rank. Lemur, he noticed that this time there were even more students than last year. While he was watching the competition, he was approached by a descendant of the Yushin family, Midja. Lemur turned to him and said that there were always enough applicants during the selection process. And then he asked Midjan if he had come to see his niece. He said that he had come for that very reason. He had to postpone important things. Their family had very high expectations of him. And so on. The instructor began to recall all the information about this girl. She was a genius who was born into the Yushin family, one of the best families in Korea. At the age of 10, she was able to use mana on a level playing field with high school students. At 13, she managed to catalyze mana into her own sword. At the age of 16, she was on a par with the rest of the Yushin family, and as a result she was able to become a leader among them. Was it written in the archives with her personal data, or was there something else he didn't know about? They said it could interact with the constellation of their family's patron saint. Lemur listened attentively to Majao, but all the facts about the girl could not fit together in his head. If he was telling the truth, then we should really expect something crazy from him. The reason why there are 5 families in Korea is due to the guardian constellations. Usually the hunter receives a blessing or makes a contract with, but the guardian constellations of the top 5 families are different from the rest. The constellation of the Yushin family was proficient in the art of the sword and passed their techniques down through the generations. A constellation of the Shanzan family, a sacred spear that had the ability to quickly concentrate mana. The constellation of the Choijian family, their power lay in their knowledge various techniques, New and Old Testaments. The constellation of the Asun family, who were invincible in close combat with their fists, and the constellation of the Dajan family, they were considered masters of the bow. The arrows they shot were capable of moving the earth. Members of each family received blessings from their patron saints and were endowed with greater abilities and talents than others. There was a big difference between receiving a simple blessing and direct contact with a constellation. Communication with the patron god is based on a contract with him. If all this information was correct, then this girl is simply brilliant. The uncle asked Lemur how his niece was doing now, but apparently she hadn't started her fight yet. Now that he looked at the area, it was likely that she would start in 30 seconds. If that was the case, Midjan decided to stay and watch the girl's actions, but the instructor said that if he wanted to see it in person, he should go downstairs. He had to go through all the scouts and reporters to make it easier for him to see. Midjan asked to put the fight on the screen because Lemur was his senior, but since he was also curious to see it, he listened to Midjan. He used the system to display the so unqualifying fight on the big screen. She was as focused as could be. The eldest daughter of the Yushin family, Sohan, was only 17 years old. Her opponent was a boy about whom there was no information, only that he was also 17 years old. Midjan thought that this was because the enemy had already lost morally when he found out who his opponent was. Every second person in the whole country has heard about this girl's abilities. He was behaving very strangely before the fight. He seemed to have a complete lack of fighting spirit. Even without this, June was sure that this would be over quickly, and they would not need to look at this talentless guy anymore. The countdown to the start of the fight had already begun. Sohan took out her weapon. Meanwhile, the guy looked like he had just woken up and got out of bed. Meanwhile, the girl was waiting for the decisive signal to start attacking. As soon as the competition started, they ran at their opponent. She looked very confident, and nothing could break her concentration. She used one of her new techniques to destroy her opponent with the help of her sword and energy storage. She struck the first blow in this battle. At such a young age, she had such a graceful way with a sword and exceptional control over the flow. Mana, the guy stood still to the last before he was hit. He had a very small smile on his face. If he was ready for this blow and knew how to defend himself, Lemur was both scared and shocked. Majoun seemed to have lost the ability to speak and showed only emotions. Even the reporters and journalists were not expecting this because everyone knew about this girl's abilities. This guy's name was Kim, and he defeated the strongest participant in this qualifier with a single punch. He was surprised why everyone was so weak. This was definitely the future that came 300 years later. 300 years ago, things were very different at the Tower of Destruction. This boy fought one-on-one. He faced an opponent 10 times stronger than anyone else in this election. Kim fought against the boss of the Tower of Destruction and defeated him, but the smile on the boss's face did not disappear. Kim was a martial arts god, so his powers were not comparable to the rest. After a short pause, he made a decisive kick right in the face of the boss. He used it to confirm his boss's words that it was a really great fight. He fell to the ground and lay still forever. He had a system that sent him notifications after each task. This time he defeated the boss of the Tower of Destruction and thus stopped the collapse of the world, but the tower itself began to collapse. Because he killed his boss, he did not expect such a result. His body was stiff, and he was also heavily wounded, and he wanted to finally relax. He was always busy with something, and he worked as a hunter since childhood. It was when he earned a little money and achieved recognition that this trouble happened to him. He wondered if he should have called his students for help, but he knew the answer to it. He believed that these were his problems, so he had to solve them himself. If there was one thing he couldn't argue with, it was the enormous strength of this bastard. Even if he had called them, they would have died just like him. Kim lay on the ground and smiled until his last breath, until a pile of stones fell on him, which put an end to his existence in that world. He woke up after his death and couldn't think straight, because he didn't know what had happened to him. Kim was reincarnated in the body of a 17-year-old boy, 300 years after the fall of the Tower of Destruction. In any case, he was satisfied with his position for a while, even though his body was much weaker. At the same time, his knowledge and experience that he had gained when he was a martial arts god had not disappeared. If only he could get used to this body. Kim thought that this time he would be able to live his life in luxury, doing nothing until this transparent window appeared. That was his goal. He received a message that in 5 years there would be a Tower of Destruction, and he needed to get ready. He felt as if he was offended by it. I should have left that bastard to his fate when I had the chance, but there was no point in talking about it because he couldn't influence the past anyway. His time, he was determined to destroy the tower once and for all, and then he will finally be able to start the life of his dreams and bathe in wealth and do nothing. He again received a notification that he had to return the weapons and memories. They were on the 3rd floor of the room of Valhalla. He knew what kind of weapon he was talking about, but hadn't he recovered all his memories earlier? Looks like he'll have to find this Valhalla. Meanwhile, Valhalla was on day 4 of the competition for the top 10. People who wanted to take part in the competition had to go to the competition site. He began to hesitate before going out to fight, but I still had to do it to complete the task. Reporters and journalists were very excited to see this super newcomer again. The more noticed that there were a lot of people there. It was Ekos. Representatives of all 5 families were on the competition ground at the same time, but in addition to them, the currently undefeated rookie was also present again. His name was Kim, and he was treating this competition with arrogance, as if he could beat everyone. This time his opponent was a representative of another famous family. He was the eldest son of the Asen family. He knew it was the same guy he was able to defeat Sohan on the first day, but he didn't look like a strong guy at all. But for him it was even better if he can beat him. His reputation will grow significantly. Kim prepared for the fight with the same face as before. Seek promised him that he would destroy him so quickly that he would not even have time to realize it. Kim was laughing at him and didn't understand what he was trying to tell him because his diction was completely unintelligible. The guy said he would knock him out. In this case, Kim is forced to take a strong stand against him. Sahik did not understand what the guy meant at all. Kim said that this means the end of his career as a fighter and his participation in this competition. Sahik is the eldest son of the Asan family. He was also 17 years old. He wasn't very good at literature, strategy, or martial arts, but he had a talent that was beyond the rest. It was his unsurpassed physical form. Compared to his peers, he looked like a killing machine. His physical strength alone enabled him to do things that others would never have been able to do without the use of his mana, and a little training helped increase his strength exponentially. He was born with a first-class physique that required no effort to perfect. He was worthy of being called a genius. For that alone, he was able to crush any enemy with his strength. But Kim had much more advantages over this powerful guy. He told him to get out of here if he wanted to stay safe. But Sahik couldn't put 2 words together to answer him, so he decided to use his abilities to answer. So I jumped on the guy to show him what he could do and get even for what he said. With Kim's new body in direct physical contact, he would not be defeated. He didn't know what level his other skills were, but his strength was top-notch. But his physical superiority did not mean that he could win. He is fully invested in each of his strokes, so you can use this to your advantage. If you use martial arts in conjunction with this physique, it would be a very noisy mixture. But he is not capable of that. The guy dodged his every blow, and he continued to use up his stamina. He didn't use any strategies or tactics, just ran at the enemy with the idea of attacking him as hard as possible. While he was dodging his blows, Seek lost more than half of his stamina, and it was a good opportunity to observe his strengths and understand what he is capable of. Now it was Kim's turn to show his strength and attack him. He made it look much more convincing and effective. The guy fell from one clear blow to the head and could not get up anymore. If all the components of a fighter are not in harmony, then something like this happens. Even though his body was weaker than what he had before reincarnation, he shouldn't have any problems hunting monsters. Kim just calmly turned around and walked off the competition floor. The whole association watched this unique fighter. No one had any information on him, but he impressed them more and more at each battle. Seek was outmaneuvered and struck while he was conducting his attack. None of them thought that Seek would be dealt with using such a simple technique. Among these experts was the boy's father, the head of the Ocean family. Kishin thought they were stupid idiots because it was obviously not a conventional technique. Even though his son never showed any desire to learn martial arts, but only worked on his physical form, he could easily dodge the fist of any of his peers. But it was something he couldn't avoid. His emotions overcame his common sense, and he simply attacked his opponent. In addition, he used magic, which he rarely uses, to end the fight faster, but Kim only tilted his head slightly to dodge the blow. Since he believed that Kim would definitely be hit, he completely shifted his center of gravity, and Kim was able to knock him down with a simple kick. Even though he was 3 times his size, all he had to do was recognize his strengths and counterattack, so he was moving faster. Seek from the moments the heck entered the set, Kim already had a plan in place. Of course, it was a crazy talent to analyze the enemy to such an extent. He decided to wait for him at the exit to see him with his own eyes and talk to him, but unfortunately there were many others who also realized the value of this super newcomer's skills. He watched him through a large screen in his office. The man said he would try to bring him into the family by any means necessary. The next time he went to fight, he was met differently. The whole audience was there just to see Nunu. They were all in love with her. Kim didn't understand how they could afford to look at a 17-year-old girl. Even after serving in the army, it was the final battle of the ranking matches of this competition. His opponent was Erin, the second daughter of the Choi Jen family. Their fight started and the girl was in full combat readiness. Kim waited for her to start attacking him, but nothing happened. She stood still, just like he did in the first minute of the match. They did not come even an inch closer, and then he realized that Erin was waiting for him to attack, to defend, counterattack. She is at least trying to read and analyze the situation. This already makes her better than the other teenagers before her. Then he wondered whether he should take the first step, because he was a man after all, and he walked toward her with his casual gait. He even wondered how she would act in such a case, because Kim didn't know what to expect from Erin. She immediately grabbed her weapon and began to activate the energy storage. The audience was shocked that the girl had the ability to replace the elements of the Choi Jun family at the age of 17. All the children from the 5 families are simply amazing. This time he was waiting for her to make a move in response. His task was to wait until she showed what she could do. She decided to attack him unexpectedly, as it seemed to her, and to attack him, she pulled out her sword and used her ability, which was admired by the entire audience. It struck its blow, but Kim was expecting him, of course, so he was able to dodge that. Erin didn't even notice where he went. She showed him with her eyes where she was going to attack, and it was very easy to dodge such an attack. He walked behind her in one motion and disappeared from her sight. He waited specifically for her to notice him so that he wouldn't attack the girl from behind, and then he just struck one of his blows. The girl suffered some damage but managed to stand on her feet. Kim was surprised that she was able to defend herself against the attack. She used her weapon for defense and offense, therefore she did not sustain any injuries, only lost balance with her body. She managed to dodge it thanks to her sword. It was no wonder he didn't feel like he had hit her. Her stamina was dropping very quickly, and her body was shaking after the defense. Kim came very close to her and put his hand on the sword. He realized that the girl had lost almost all her strength, and now he wanted her to try to dodge his next blow. He took just one step forward, but the blow was very strong. It first flew into the air 2 meters above the ground, and then she collapsed like a defenseless girl. Kim was not satisfied with his attack this time. He felt that something was definitely not the same as usual. His posture was slightly distorted by the impact, but it didn't matter because he won the entire tournament and got a place in this institution. He was the top one out of all students who entered this institute. After the competition, he decided to go home or grab a bite to eat, but as soon as he left the competition grounds, he was surrounded by reporters and journalists. He was also harassed by representatives of guilds with various offers to join their associations, promising the best conditions. He was very annoyed and started to get angry. Kim asked them to leave him alone and not to be so intrusive. Kim was considered unbalanced because after winning the competition for membership, he went crazy and humiliated everyone when they wanted to interview him and invite him to their guild. It Was the first day of school at Valhalla. Only the strongest students gathered here. They lined up and listened to the greetings from the teachers and staff of the school as they talked about how proud Valhalla is of its centuries-old history. Kim almost fell asleep from boredom. He noticed that other students were constantly looking at him, but when he turns to them they immediately hide their eyes from his gaze. Was he really able to stand out from the crowd? But in any case he had a task to find his weapons and memories. The system told him that they were in Valhalla. He just needed to get in and out. It shouldn't be a problem. Finally, they finished the welcoming ceremony for the new students. The former head of Valhalla's instructors, Lee Gun, was unhappy that the students were distributed in this way. In the first line was So-in from the Yushin family, and next to her was Aaron from the Choi-jun family. This giant was right in the center from the Asun family. They promised that the students would be assigned to classes in a random order. He did not believe that three geniuses could accidentally end up in the same class. Then he turned his gaze and saw another guy. It was Kim, who defeated all three of these geniuses without any problems. The instructor didn't understand why he was also there this year. He was just in trouble, but he decided to try to calm down. In situations like this he has to stay strong and not give in to emotions. The Gun greeted the students and said that he was very happy to see them. He introduced himself as the person in charge of their class as well as their personal instructor. After that he reached for his keyboard on the desktop and pressed an incomprehensible button. Something strange began to happen in the classroom. It was as if the walls and furniture began to move. They moved to another place thanks to the instructor. Kim was very calm as usual, but he also did not understand why they had moved here. Ligon had an idea of its own. It prepared something special for new students. He decided to demonstrate a little bloodlust. He summoned many monsters for them, consisting of orcs and trolls. There were really a lot of them in relation to students. They completely surrounded them from all sides, and it was impossible to escape. Sahik was calm. He realized that they were orcs and goblins and raided them at most 100. They looked very hungry and ready to attack anyone. This crowd of monsters started running toward the students, but they were stopped by a strong shield that blocked their way to the disciples. They jumped on the shield, tried to punch it. Some even tried to chew it, but all these attempts led to nothing. The instructor was smiling, so everything was going according to plan. He wanted to test how reliable this barrier was and how long it would be able to hold off monsters while the creatures were trying to break through the barrier. Ligon called Kim over. He approached him and expected to hear something interesting. The instructor asked him if he could handle these monsters alone. The guy decided to clarify whether he meant those running behind Dome. Kim said without hesitation that he could do it without any problems. Lagoon thought that with this, he could scare the new student. Most students have only seen real monsters in books but never met them in person. So he expected Kim to be scared. He wanted the boy to stop pretending to be thinking. The instructor wanted to eradicate this arrogance from his classroom and then start a normal lesson. The boy saw the teacher's reaction and laughed. He was very angry because he expected a completely different reaction. Looking at the way he was smiling, he thought that Kim would be able to deal with them on his own and without any help. Lagoon believed that this boy continued to bluff, but he wasn't going to do it just like that, because they're not supposed to do it on the first day of their studies. Seeing how he's trying to test it, it was logical to get some kind of reward for it. Although there was no prize in their terms, Lugon offered to discuss it now. He asked what the instructor was willing to bet that he would not be able to handle these monsters. Lagoon said that if he could handle them, he would do absolutely everything within his authority. The guy thought about such an attractive offer. Although it sounded quite hypocritical, he agreed. Ligon said that he doubted that monsters in this system were any different from the real ones. Kim asked for less talk and just to give him a sword, because how else could he fight them? Did he really think that a guy would confront monsters with his bare hands? The instructor agreed and began to draw his own sword. After that he handed it to the boy. Kim looked at the sword for several minutes and tried to figure out what it was made of. Lagan opened the barrier, and the boy started to go out to the goblins and orcs for a fair fight. The instructor was sure that he would not succeed and that he was just another arrogant little student. All the students in his class were watching him closely, especially the girls he had defeated a few days earlier. He raised his sword and prepared to fight the monsters. A few seconds later, he was destroying them one by one without stopping. Kim had no doubts about his abilities, even though he was in the body of a young weak boy. In his hands, the sword turned into a meat grinder for monsters. They were attacking him from all sides, but it didn't cause any problems for Kim. He skillfully wielded the sword as if it were his own weapon. It didn't take long for more than half of the orcs and trolls to be destroyed. It had been 300 years since he had held a sword in his hands. In those days, monsters caused unreal chaos in the world, and they used any object as a weapon. But for him, the sword has always been something special. While he stood still and enjoyed this moment, an orc attacked him from behind, but the guy noticed it and he just took a step to the side. The monster attacked quite primitively, As he had guessed, the pattern of their behavior is quite simple. Although real monsters were not very strong either, these were just fakes. The students could only stand behind the barrier and watch Kim. The most surprised was the instructor, who argued with him he had no magic and no boosters, and how he was able to destroy them so easily. It looked as if the sword itself attracted monsters and made them jump on the weapon. Aaron watched him very carefully, but there was a thirst for revenge and hatred in her eyes. She couldn't look away either, but simply out of surprise and admiration. So walked closer to the barrier to see its movements and attacks. He destroyed all the monsters, and his stamina did not decrease at all. When he finished, he asked me to come down to the room as a reward. Kim calmly hid the sword because all the goblins and orcs were dead. This did not deter him from using a lot of effort. He hoped that Lee Gun would fulfill their promise that they had talked about before the battle. The man was silent because anything he tried to say would look like an excuse. All the lessons lasted quite a long time.